Express building, agency building. Also, the town of Oelwein was laid out in a cornfield purchased from G.A. Oelwein in 1872 on the coming to Burlington, Cedar Rapids, and Minnesota Railroad. It was later called the Chicago Rock Island and Pacific Railroad. Also, the rail yard is a former Chicago Great Western rail yard as well.
You see right behind me is Minneapolis and St. Louis 16209.
Minneapolis and St. Louis 16209 was built around like the early or mid 1900s and is a flat car. Minneapolis and St. Louis 16209 was used on railroads on such as the Minneapolis and St. Louis Railroad many years ago and hauled many different types of cargo such as a giant crate, semi-trailers, work machines, and even hauled pipes and even plywood and old railroad ties and new railroad ties and newer railroad tracks and much more, much others that it may have hauled many years ago. Then later on, Minneapolis and St. Louis 16209 was retired and then came to be part of the Hub City Heritage Corporation Railroad Museum in Oelwein, Iowa, where it is preserved today.
Okay, I'm going to tell you about the yard tower,
This tower is a yard tower used for the Chicago Great Western Railroad many years ago. The Chicago Great Western Yard Tower was constructed as a 75-foot dispatcher's tower. This tower was used to dispatch trains of when they were moving around in the yard many years ago. Also, it was used to dispatch the engine on the locomotive of when to go or when to stop. Also, the tower sits next to a two-story office yard building, which was maybe around longer as the rail yard and tower, and you could even check out the interior of it, and there are exhibits seen in there and even a gift shop as well. And next to the building is a Railway Express agency building, which was originally the home of Wells Fargo and Company Express in 1912, shortly after World War I in 1918. The structure was acquired by the American Express Company and in 1930. Also, this tower is the last of the Chicago Great Western Railroad dispatchers towers and the last tower in the state of Iowa. Chicago, St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Omaha 55 was built by Electromotor Division in 1940 and is the 1194th diesel locomotive built by that factory and is an EMDS W1 type diesel locomotive. Chicago, St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Omaha 55 was used as a yard switcher for the Chicago, St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Omaha Railroad, being used for sorting cars and even shunting cars around in the rail yard many years ago. Then later, the locomotive was used for the Chicago Northwestern Railroad and numbered as Chicago Northwestern 616. Also, this locomotive was used eventually as a shunter switcher locomotive in the Chicago Northwestern Yard and worked there for a while. Then, like I think in 1988, the locomotive was retired and then came to be part of the Hub City Heritage Corporation Railroad Museum in Oelwein, Iowa, where it is today. Also, like between 1989 and 2009, it was repainted into the Chicago, St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Omaha paint scheme, and it was at its original number is 55 and can be preserved at the museum where it is today.
Okay, you could see right here, this is the railroad map. Yeah, it's not moving. Yet it's not latched. And I think sometimes they let people drive it. It's just parked just right here. I'm not sure, but maybe. So you can see how the handles are used. Go like this, and also moving down the tracks. And you were out this side while this was out, you go this way. That's how working a handcar does. Okay, you can see right here, this is a Fairmont speeder. It might have been built to be open air, roofless. Roofless, I should say. And also, surrounding it, perhaps. I don't know. But this one was years ago, then retired, and then came in here to the Hub City Heritage Corporation Railroad Museum, where it is now today. Okay, I'm going to show you the exhibit. So, entering the building is that part of the door down there where that minivan is. You see behind me where that minivan is parked? Yeah, the door to enter that building is right beside where that minivan is parked. So I'll carry the camera around, so come along. Okay, so we're in another part of the building. So gonna walk around and see all these. That's a coat. Here's some picture frames. That's a skeleton of a steam engine, you see how the parts work. And here's an old switch stand, and here's so much. Here's some old telegraph keys. Those are what used, those handles you see are for what changes the signal. Some pictures right here. Pretty cool, huh? And here's some, that's the picture of the 116, which is out in the yard. And here's a lot to see here. Pretty amazing, huh? There's so much. Can't resist. Here's an Oelwein can. That's a head lantern. These are chairs from a Chicago Great Western dining car. Pictures. Let you pause it if you'd like to see. Yep. You pause. Let you pause. So, how cool is this? Oh, and here's some, in this case, lantern. Key, switch key locks, padlocks. Lanterns. And wow, amazing. Okay, so we're gonna enter the model railroad area.
Yeah.
See how well detailed they have this. Wow, pretty interesting. So let's walk around and look. This is HO you see here, and also you could see up here Chicago Great Western 330 with a circus train among this wall as well. So much. What you see right behind me is Conrail 44305.
Conrail 44305 was built like somewhere in the mid 1900s and is a hopper car. Conrail 44305 was used on the Conrail line many years ago, being used on a mixed traffic train or mixed freight train, or on a train with hopper cars, and even on different rail lines eventually. Also, this hopper car hauled many different types of cargo, such as like rocks, coal, gravel, rubble, and many other different types of cargo may have hauled in many years ago. Then later on, Conrail 44305 was then retired and then later came to be part of the Hub City Heritage Corporation Railroad Museum in Oelwein, Iowa, where it is preserved today.
What you see right behind me is Minnesota Transfer 62.
Minnesota Transfer 62 was built by Alco in Schenectady, New York in 1941 and is the 69 490th diesel locomotive built by that factory and is an Alco S1 type diesel locomotive. Minnesota Transfer 62 was used for the Minnesota Transfer Company many years ago and shunting rolling stock around in the facility. Also, the locomotive was used even moving cars around in the rail yard as well. Minnesota Transfer 62 was equally owned by 9 railroads: the Twin Cities, the Chicago Great Western, and Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific. Each had a 1/9 interest in the railway. Also served the Minnesota Transfer until 1964, when it was sold to Relco, a locomotive leasing company in Illinois that leases switch engines to industrial users. Relco renumbered this unit to RE 702 in the GE Railcar Services in Waterloo, Iowa, purchased this unit from Relco in 1990 and renumbered it 1990. Then later Minnesota Transfer 62 was retired and then came to be part of the Hub City Heritage Corporation Railroad Museum and by General Electric Railcar Services Corporation in 2006. Iowa Northern Railway generously transported it to the Hub City Heritage Corporation Railroad Museum in Oelwein, Iowa, where it is preserved today. Also, Minnesota Transfer 62 is like the only remaining Minnesota Transfer switcher diesel that survives today as well.
Okay, this is right there, that's the railroad sign, which it goes down. Yellow one, that's the yellow because it's Minnesota. Also, that green one means go, that red means stop, and also is on display. It's retired. The Hub City Heritage Corporation Railroad Museum in Oelwein, Iowa. Okay, you can see here's another thing. There's 246 because milepost 246. Yeah, 246 is what it says. And also, it is even where it was put onto the tracks, now retired, and right here it is at the Hub City Corporation Railroad Museum in Oelwein, Iowa. What you see right behind me is
Chicago Great Western.
2081.
Chicago Great Western 2081 was built around the mid 1900s and is a bulkhead flat car. Chicago Great Western 2081 was used a lot on freight trains on the Chicago Great Western Railroad many years ago, and also hauled cargo such as plywood, pipes, and as long as they were tied together, logs, wood, and steel beams, and many others that this car carried a long time ago. Then later, Chicago Great Western 2081 was retired and then later came to be part of the Hub City Heritage Corporation Railroad Museum in Oelwein, Iowa, where it is preserved today. Also, it is used for cab access to Chicago Great Western 116A's cab as well.
You see right behind me is Chicago Northwestern 251-394.
Chicago Northwestern 251-394 was built, I think, around the mid-1900s and is a boxcar. This boxcar was used on freight trains and even used on the Chicago Northwestern Railroad many years ago in hauling cargo on board, such as boxes and all of other cargo this boxcar might have hauled in the past. Also, this boxcar was used as a maintenance of way boxcar for the Chicago Northwestern. Then later on, Chicago Northwestern 251-394 was retired and then came to be part of the Hub City Heritage Corporation Railroad Museum in Oelwein, Iowa, where it can be seen today.
What you see right behind me is Chicago Great Western 637.
Chicago Great Western 637 was built in 1963 and is a bay window caboose. Chicago Great Western 637 was used on freight trains on the Chicago Great Western Railroad many years ago, also used as the train crew's office. Then I believe it was used on the Chicago Northwestern Railroad as well, and it was, of course, and was numbered as Chicago Northwestern Railroad, Chicago Northwestern 10536 when used on that railroad. Then later, Chicago Great Western 637 was retired and came to be part of the Hub City Heritage Corporation Railroad Museum in Oelwein, Iowa, and put on static display. Also, whenever the museum is open, you can even visit the interior of the caboose and check out the inside as well.
What you see right behind me is Chicago Great Western 92105.
Chicago Great Western 92105 was built in 1944 and is a 40-foot boxcar. Chicago Great Western 92105 was used on freight trains and even used on the Chicago Great Western Railroad many years ago in hauling cargo on board, such as boxes and all other cargo this boxcar might have hauled in the past. Also, this car might have also been given another railroad name, which was Chicago Northwestern, and even transferred to that railroad. Then later on, Chicago Great Western 92105 was then retired and then came to be part of the Hub City Heritage Corporation Railroad Museum in Oelwein, Iowa, where it is preserved today.
What you see right behind me is Chicago Rock Island and Pacific 17958.
Chicago Rock Island and Pacific 17958 was built in 1914 and is a wooden caboose. Chicago Rock Island and Pacific 17958 is one of the several cabooses used on the Chicago Rock Island and Pacific Railroad on freight trains many years ago. Also, this caboose is what was used as an office for the train crew many years ago when being used behind freight trains. Then, later, in the 1900s, Chicago Rock Island and Pacific 17958 was retired and then donated to the city of Oelwein, Iowa, and then came to be part of the Hub City Heritage Corporation Railroad Museum as well, and seen on display. And in 2009, the caboose was repainted and cosmetically restored, and you Also, you can even check out the interior of the caboose as well while visiting the museum during the hours. Also, Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific 17958 is one of only two remaining wooden Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific cabooses left in the world today. And Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific 18058 can be found at the Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, and 17958 can be found here at the Hub City Heritage Corporation Railroad Museum in Oelwein, Iowa, where it is today.
What you see right behind me is Chicago Great Western 7230.
Chicago Great Western 7230 was built around somewhere in the mid 1900s and is a covered hopper car. Chicago Great Western 7230 was used on freight trains many years ago and was also used especially on mixed traffic trains or a train with many grain cars, and even hauled cargo such as grain and even flour, sugar, and even cocoa powder, and many different products that this covered hopper car hauled many years ago. Then later, Chicago Great Western 7230 was retired and then came to be part of the Hub City Heritage Corporation Railroad Museum in Oelwein, Iowa, where it is preserved today.
What you see right behind me is Chicago Great Western 116A. Chicago Great Western 116A was built by Electromotive Division in LaGrange, Illinois in 1950 and is the 135/59th diesel locomotive built by that factory and is an FP7A type diesel locomotive. Originally, the locomotive was used for the Chicago Great Western Railroad and was used for hauling trains on the system around Chicago, Illinois, Iowa, and Minnesota, and many other locations along the system. And it was likely primarily used for hauling freight trains. Then in 1968, when the Chicago Great Western was purchased by the Chicago Northwestern Railroad, it was renumbered to 17. Then, in 1985, the locomotive was then retired and was then acquired by the Hub City Heritage Corporation Railroad Museum in Oelwein, Iowa by the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad. Before it went to the museum, it was repainted with a purple, yellow, and orange paint scheme. Then, like around 2013 or 2015, the locomotive was repainted with a full purple color. Then, in 2015, the locomotive's engine was started up after 30 years of slumber, and more likely, the museum sometimes fires it up, but it stays stationary in the spot it's in, though. Today, it is preserved here at the Hub City Heritage Corporation Railroad Museum in Oelwein, Iowa, for all to see and enjoy. And you can even visit the locomotive's cab during regular museum hours as well, and there are likely certain times the engine gets fired up as well. Also, to enter the cab, the thing you must do is climb onto the flat car and enter through the back end as well, but be cautious when standing on the flat car that is coupled behind it, though. Okay, you can see this piece right here looks like a piece that was made to smooth rails down, because when this would be moved down the track, it would either smooth the rails like you'd use sandpaper to smooth wood and such. And this, I believe, was used by the Rock Island Railroad till ending up here. Well, I hope y'all enjoy learning about trains with me today in Matthew Lap Train Guy. Also, I hope to see y'all again real soon, and if you didn't subscribe to the channel yet, the subscribe button is just down below the video screen. And if you didn't give the Facebook page a like yet, here's where you'll want to go. And if you didn't give the Instagram page a follow yet, here's where you want to go as well. Also, be sure to get your merch at teesprings.com. The link is in the description box below, along with the Facebook and Instagram pages. And as always, remember to subscribe to the Train Guy. So this is Matthew Lapp, host of Matthew Lap Train Guy, sign now. Until next time, all aboard!